trying to manage it, there's all sorts of options. And again, I'm just going to go back to self-care for a moment. It just means even going outside and taking a deep breath once in a while. If you're at home and you're feeling the stress of the situation. There's a beautiful quote by Viktor Frankl, and he was an Austrian psychiatrist that was in the Holocaust. During the Holocaust, he was in the camps, and he survived. And he wrote a great book called Man's Search for Meaning. And in that book, he said one of the reasons he survived was because between stimulus and response lies this space. And in this space, we have the power to choose our response. And in that response lies our freedom and our growth. So when it comes to parenting, when you feel a stimulus coming on because of what your kids are doing or not doing, or your significant others doing or not doing, rather than ignore it, because if we ignore it, it's going to feed itself. And when it feeds itself, it gets to a place there's no way we can create that space. And so then what we end up doing is reacting to the situation versus responding. So that's, reacting is a very unconscious way of parenting. Responding is a very conscious way of parenting. So just even, you hear the kids complaining or, they're not listening, stop. Take a deep breath. Count to 10. I don't know, do 10 push-ups, something that creates that space, because then in that space, you can decide, how do I want to handle the situation? And I can pretty much guarantee you, however you do it, it'll come out much more responsive and respectful than if we ignore it and then boom. See, you guys are all together now in that house, right? For the most part. So it's really learning how to manage all that. And I tell you guys, parents, it starts with you. All right. I mean, there's little things you can do, like besides taking care of yourself and creating that space, use actions, not words. Parents, especially us moms, we have a tendency of talking way too much, and it becomes what we call parent deafness, right? So use actions. If your child's supposed to be sitting in front of a screen doing work, gently guide them over there. There's just so many different things you can do. If they're supposed to take their dishes into the kitchen or into the sink, you hand them the plate as they're getting up. So the thing is, you guys, the less words, the better off everybody will be, and that will bring down any kind of complaining and arguing. Speaking softly. A child says, it's time for you to do your homework. I don't want to do my homework. And you're like, you have to do your homework. And I don't want to do my homework, right? That's going nowhere fast. And you get two people really upset with each other. But if you say, hey, it's time to do your homework. I don't want to do my homework. You go, hey, what's going on for you right now? It's homework time, but wow, you sound really upset. And so just you bringing your tone down, more often than not, your child will come with you on that one.
I think it's interesting. A couple of the examples you gave about actions, the handing of the plate as they go by is interesting, because I know a lot of parents who then will fall into the trap of, I'll just do it myself. I've already got it. I'm going to go. How do you avoid just doing everything for your kids, making sure that they still fulfill their responsibilities without, as you said, it turning into an ugly scene, a fight at home, something that's adding to the stress?
Well, first of all, I would suggest you don't try doing what I'm telling you 24/7, because it's like saying, I'm going to go run a marathon. So the first day I go out running, I run 26 miles. That's never going to work. I'll never walk again. So it's the same thing with these tools. Like maybe just carve out a time in the day, like between 12 and 1 or 8 and 9 in the morning, something where you're going to focus in and lock in on this. And then the rest of the day, just do what you have to do for basic survival. When it comes to doing something for your child, listen, you guys, you don't want to do too much for them. You don't want to micromanage them, because in the bigger picture they're learning, I can depend on everybody else to take care of my business. And that's not a good thing. But sometimes you just like, I don't even have it in me today to even speak in a kind way. So sometimes if you're going to do, like, take the plate to the sink, just do it with no words. Like almost do it like you forgot it was their job. Don't say, okay, honey, I'm not going to ask you to do your plates because no, just do it. They're supposed to get their own shoes on, but this is one of those mornings you're like, oh my gosh, I don't even want to deal with this. So just put their shoes on with no words. And they're like, Mom, that's supposed to be my job. And you're like, oops, my bad. I forgot. Oh, well.
I have a test going on at my home right now. We went on a road trip a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to see how long they go without unpacking their bags before, because I haven't told them, because they know they should do it. They're just sitting there. It's like at some point, I think they'll get the message that mom and dad aren't going to do it for them, and see if we ever get there.
Well, Ben, if you can't handle it, when it gets to that point, you're like, I would just, with no words, guide them into their room, and they're looking at you like, Dad, no words, put them in front of their suitcase, unzip it, and point. No words.
Well, and sometimes one parent can be more patient than the other. In situations like that.
Don't do it when you're upset.
I want to ask you about the different family dynamics, because we get a lot of questions about, single parent families, co-parenting, and then maybe the traditional two-parent families. And I think they all have their own challenges. I'll start with a traditional two-parent family. How do you manage the, dividing up the time, especially when you have younger children and maybe both parents are working, and they're trying to make it fair? Hey, yeah, we need to make sure you watch the kids now, you watch the kids in the afternoon, make sure they get their school done. Just managing what feels like extra work, especially during this pandemic.
I think one of the best things to do, again, you guys are all your own best experts, so you get to decide what works for you. But what I've found, one thing that works is, like, on Sunday afternoon, the two parents sit down and they pull out a calendar of some sort. And I'd rather you do a big calendar so the kids can see it somewhere, like the old-fashioned Staples calendars, or just do it on your laptop. But schedule out every day, and what needs to be done during, as you would in any company, any business, right? You have a staff meeting and you figure out what the projects are for the week. Well, parents, do that on Sunday before, even if you can, make some meals on Sunday or something. I also suggest, so you do that, and you just calendar out the whole week the best as you can. And I would suggest even if the parent is one's working and the other one's working, but working with the kids, still divvy out that time. Don't expect the one with the kid to be with them 8 hours a day. If there's any chance, every 2 hours, I would switch out a little bit to give the other person a little bit of a break. I know work is tough, and I also know being with kids, for most part, it's going to be a lot tougher. So it's just really working as a team, but get it planned on Sunday when you have some time. I'm not a big proponent of TV, but if you have to put your kids in front of a movie for an hour so that you can do this, do it, because this is a time that you guys have to, you got to keep your sanity in place. Otherwise, the whole situation, there's a saying that your kids hardly ever hear what you say, but they're always watching what you do. So if they can see both parents sitting down, working out a schedule, asking some input from the kids, especially the older kids, bring them in on the scheduling. When would they like to do their work, and just work it together? And then you set limits around it. The kids are like, well, I just want to do part of my school in the morning and part of my homework in the afternoon. Say, well, okay, let's give that a try. And if it works, fabulous. And if not, then tomorrow you do it on our schedule, and we'll see how that goes. And then we'll take you back. And if you want, you can go back to your schedule. So that's where you keep giving them a little bit of responsibility and see how they handle it. And if they handle it, they keep it. But if not, you pull on back, and then you put it in your realm for a bit, and then you hand it back over to them to try it again.
I think that's great, especially for parents who really are a team. My wife and I do the Sunday, we get out our day planners every Sunday, look at the whole week so we can kind of anticipate any challenges that are coming up in the next few days. But obviously not all parents are in that situation. Some parents are not together. They may have new spouses, yet they're co-parenting a child together, and that teamwork may not be there. Are there any tips that better ways to handle a situation like that where you want to keep the bitter feelings, I'd say, to a minimum?
That's a nice way of putting it. Yeah. So the thing is, if you're co-parenting with someone else who's not in the household with you, just do what you need to do at the home. You can't really impact the other household, and you're not if you're not conversing and communicating in a healthy way, you calling them and nagging them or ragging on what they're doing or not doing is not helpful. All you have control over is what's in front of you in your house. So you do the best that you can while their kids are with you. For you that are single parents out there, I was a single parent as my kids were getting older. And I have videos of me. I saw it the other day, I don't know where it came from, but my kids were set up in these different 4 boys, all between 2nd grade and 8th grade or something, kitchen table, living room, and I just went from station to station, just checking on it. Meanwhile, in the middle is my kitchen and I'm making dinner, but it worked. And I just needed to keep them a little bit apart because they all had different schoolwork to go on. And it worked for me, So you got to come up with best. But if you're a single parent, don't try to make up for being both parents. You're a one human being. That's enough. So don't try to compensate for the other parent. Just be who you are. Be authentic to yourself. Call in your kids for help. My kids came to the rescue as much as I could remember when I said, hey, I need some help with this situation. This morning stuff, it seems like it's crazy in the morning getting you to school. So let's come up with a game plan.
You had 4. So I think this is applicable to dealing with siblings. And it can depend on ages. It can depend on just how close they are in age as well. But how much can you get maybe your kids to work together to kind of team up to help out in this unusual circumstance? And then what happens on the other hand when you get, siblings who just fight a lot and don't have that teamwork? How do you handle that as a parent?
If you read my parenting book, my oldest son will say, we spent our life playing WWF. Isn't that what that is, that wrestling thing? I'm like, kind of right. 4 boys, right? So yeah, it's great if you can get the older kids, you can hire them to tutor the 6-year-old. Like if you got a 12-year-old, bring him in the workforce and let him oversee the youngin. Give yourself a break, you guys. And create that team. And if they're fighting a lot, you see, fighting's not a normal thing. We think sometimes because kids fight so much it's normal. It's not. It's like 90% of your kids fighting is for parents' attention. 10% of the time your kids fight is because they're just mad at each other. So that 90% is normally caused by the fact that they know they're going to get some attention from a parent. So if you stop giving it so much attention and say to them, I've noticed at times, and why don't you just come and ask me for some attention? And then if your kids are fighting, you just separate them and you say to them, you two, the TV's off or Xbox is done or no more playing on the swing or whatever until you two figure out how to make it work for both of you. Like that's one thing I didn't have, Ben, with my boys raising up, that one sentence. How are you guys going to make this work for both of you? It's a beautiful statement and it teaches kids how to deal with conflict. It teaches kids how to take responsibility for conflict. So parents out there, if you have kids, well, I think all kids fight once in a while, or at least argue. So how are you two going to make it work? When you're stuck, when my boys were becoming teenagers, there wasn't a lot of rules and, this guy, I couldn't just be the heavy hitter with these kids. They're all big boys. They're all 6'8". But one thing I did learn to say to them as a teenager, hey, I hear this is what you're wanting to do. This is what I feel about that. Help me out. How are we going to make this work for both of us?
How do you think you would have handled it if you had to do the distance learning thing back when your boys were still in the house?
Yeah.
And dad's out traveling, whatever, and you're responsible for 4 kids. They're not only trying to learn, but they're also missing their friends. They're wanting to get out, but you want to make sure they're staying safe and not doing anything that's gonna get them caught with the virus out there. How do you think you kind of would have managed this with the 4 boys?
Ben, that's a great question. Well, first of all, that visual I was just giving you, putting them in parts of the house where they wanted to be, I think I would have definitely have done that. I mean, good news, bad news, 4 boys, not even girls, 4 boys, and that's 4 is a good amount of kids, but we traveled a lot because of their dad's job when they were younger, but I feel like they had instant friends always. Like just having 4 kids, I'm not telling you guys to go have more kids so that your kids can be entertained by each other, but it certainly worked in our family that they always had each other. And, we had a basketball hoop on the driveway there. So they always go out and play ball. So as you're talking to me, I feel very blessed and fortunate that I could have actually made that work. The thing is, my kids in 6th grade started saying, what are you going to teach us? Like, I think we know more than you, which was probably true. Because they say every generation is smarter than the next. So you guys out there, ask your kids for advice. You that have kids that are power kids and they just want, those kids, they're very challenging and provoking. Bring them on your team. Ask them, help me out with this situation. I've never done this before. You're going to be in awe of what they come up with. It's pretty amazing.
What would you do if, one of your kids, say, a 12-year-old comes up to you in the morning and goes, I can't do this today. You know what? I'm not feeling well. I just can't do this today. because I think we all understand that. I think we've all had that feeling over these last few months. I don't know if I can do this today, sitting in front of another Zoom screen and doing work like this. Kids are just the same way. They're gonna get sick of it at times. How would you manage that? Because obviously you feel like, oh, I would have made you go to school if it was a normal
Right.
school day. What do I do at home now?
Now that's exactly what I was going to say. Well, why not? They miss school once in a while, So what, if this is a day, I mean, my mom thing was if you have a fever, you get to stay home. So um, nowadays having a fever is not a good sign. It's like, oh my gosh, right? Go get tested. But in general, it's like, if the child's like, I just can't do this today, the thing you guys want to do is detach it with love. And what I mean by that is don't get caught up in the emotional roller coaster. Well, you have to do it. No, I want you to acknowledge what they're saying and bring in some empathy. Hey, I can hear that today's one of those days it's you're just not even feeling it. And he or she was like, no, I can't. I'm like, okay, so what do you need right now then to take care of you? If they say, well, I need to go play Xbox, you're like, you don't say, nope, that's not an option. You're going to say, acknowledge again. I get you want to do Xbox right now, and that's not an option at this point. So what else do you need right now? Like maybe you just need to do something for a little bit. Maybe they need to, my niece, I was asking her about this yesterday because she has 4 boys and she was a teacher. She said, one thing in general to help out, especially with the, kids 6 or not 6, but 8 on up, have them FaceTime, but get a FaceTime buddy that they can do work together with, like as if they were in the classroom together. And that way they're not because I think what you're saying, Ben, is so true. I think a lot of kids right now are just missing people, missing their friends. I mean, that's what kids are supposed to be doing. Those poor teenagers out there, oh my gosh, they didn't know they're going to become teenagers and see their parent 24/7, right? So
Yeah.
I had that idea of budding up with someone, getting a buddy on the FaceTime and just, hey, let's do our homework together this morning.
And I saw a question, what about only children? And I know that's a tougher one for you, is, you haven't had to deal with that because siblings can be each other's friends. But I have to imagine that this would be tough for an only child as well, because not only are they cut off from school, but much more cut off from anyone else their own age, even inside their own house.
Yeah, so maybe that FaceTime business would help with that because, I mean, what else you can do? I mean, I've seen some people who have kids that, one cannot be around kids because of an immune thing. So their parents met in the driveway, and they had the kids 2 little tables, at least 6 feet apart from each other. And they sat there and did some, they had a tea party, but you could also sit there and do some work together, as long as both kids are healthy and they're outside and as far apart. I mean, some parents might not like that, but I've seen people come up and be that creative just so that, especially for these only kids, they're not just seeing parents all day long.
You mentioned Xbox, you mentioned